Hey, everybody, welcome back to the podcast. And we're here talking with my friend Kim again about writing things. And so, what are we talking about today in the process?
This has been so much fun for me to put you in the hot seat and pick your brain about what it looks like to be in the middle of launching a book. Your new book, Catching Whimsy, comes out pretty soon. And so it's fun for me to think about and to hear you kind of weigh in on what it looks like, the beginning, the middle, the launch. And today we're going to really center in on that. What does it look like to launch a book? We have lots of friends who are in the middle of this process or just finishing or just considering this process. And it used to be that when you would write a book, you would bring it to a publisher like your little child, leave it on the desk. Everyone would give you well wishes and say, see ya. Can't wait for you to write another one. And now a lot of the launch process really rests on the shoulders of an author. And so since you are right in the middle of this, I'd love to just hear a little bit from you. I know listeners would as well. How do you approach knowing when to start talking publicly about a book? Because we said in a previous episode, this book has been hanging around in your head for a long time. By the time it actually has a cover and a barcode, you're almost over it. So how do you know when to start yapping about it to other people?
Yeah, think about that for all of you listening. There has been something you're thinking about, but you want to bring it contemporary enough that it is closer to real time. Like for me to write a book about how I was in the middle of choosing colleges to go to, I mean, that's been hanging around too long. So let's talk about launches. And did you know? I don't know if I told you, but I was invited to speak at Space Force in up in north of Santa Barbara. And they said, come up at this particular time. And then you're speaking a little bit later, but make sure you're here at this particular time. And so I got hung up doing something else. And I didn't show up at that particular time. When right as I was leaving the place that was 2 hours south of where I was supposed to be, we heard this big boom. And we looked out the window as this rocket that I was supposed to be there for the launch of took off. They were surprising me.
No.
Turned out they were surprised. So the thing about launches is be there. Must be
Timing
present to
is
win.
everything.
Yeah. How do you get there to the front gate and say, oops, I'm sorry. So here's what we use for the launch of a book successfully is 120 days before the book is released.
Okay.
That's when we do it. There's an acquaintance that I have that got the book that they were going to publish maybe 6 or 8 months in advance, like a copy of it in the mail. And they showed everybody the cover, and then they were so excited about this. And then they kept talking about this book and talking about it for 8 months. And I'm like, oh my gosh, the book is not out. It's just too long.
Right.
So what I've found is 120 days before, that's when we start mentioning the book. Even though I've had the book for a year,
Right.
It's been complete for a year.
Right.
I got the cover for it 6 months ago. About 4 months out, that's when I found to be the most effective time to do it. And then keeping with our analogy, you fuel the rocket. So you don't want to just roll this thing out on the pad with no up in it.
Right.
And so the way to do that is to let people know, but without carpet bombing them with infomercials about your stupid book, because it's just not that good. So, but so you can let people know without pummeling them with it, like, wow.
Right.
So if my book Catching Whimsy, they would be saying, let it go, lose it again. So what if you let people know, and people are pretty good, like people that are tracking with your stuff, they know what you're doing. And so what we want to do is use 2 words, more and different. So launching a book is all about more and different. People that know more people than you and different people than you. Because for most authors, they have their group of people that you could read a phone book and they would think that's great because they like your voice. They go like, oh, they said Smith, like Smythe. So it's more and different people that you want to get to. We should talk about different ways to get there. So people will say, do you want to go on book tours? And that has never appealed to me. It's not a bad thing. But if that isn't your jam, then don't do it. If
Mhm.
you speak a lot, it feels like every week is a book tour because it's, you're here and there. But I never talk about the book because it's self promotional.
Mhm.
People that like your stuff these days, it may not have been that way in the cowboy days, but sorry, Texas, but these days, people know what's going on.
Right.
Right. So you don't need to always be doing an infomercial.
Right.
Having a QR code that someone else, not you, they'll say, hey, there's a new book this person
Right.
has out if you want to pick it up. Bringing it with you within that 120 days and doing some book sales in advance of the release. Like, hey, we have an arc that's available. Why don't you describe for everybody what an arc is?
Advanced readers copy. So it helps kind of build a little bit of momentum before the actual book is ready to go. Just helps people get a vision for what it is. They're not perfect copies and you can't sell them anywhere, but it helps people hold the kind of first version in their hand and get an idea. Oftentimes, ARCs are used in publicity. So sending it to a podcast host or sending it to somebody who, as you said, has more people listening and different people listening is a really good idea to help spread the word.
Yeah. So getting those the words out, if you're a speaker, if that is your thing, so like 6 or 8 months out, what I want you to do is arrange a lot of speaking events. And if that
Right.
means you at Arby's, then you're at Arby's, you and the roast beef. Like just get the word out. Don't sit huddled in.
Mm-hmm.
So talk to as many people as you can. If it's a small group that you have access to, then a small group it is.
Mm-hmm.
If it's a large group it is. So what I'd like you to do is just be thinking, how can I get in the days leading up to the release in front of as many people as possible?
Right.
Um, one thing that people that aren't familiar with the business of books, they don't realize the value and the importance of pre-sales of books. This again isn't monetizing because if you want to make bank, get a Chick-fil-A. But if you want to make a difference, well, get a Chick-fil-A and write a book. So the idea is that you want to pre-sell books so that Amazon will save, like, no, there's enough pre-sales. I better store up books. How does that
Right.
work in your experience?
Yeah, that's been a new thing in the last 10 years probably. We've changed the way that we buy books. We used to go everyone would go to a brick and mortar store. Now most people go online or use their phone or their laptop to order books. And so in response to that, that pre-order number banks up. So all the way up until the first week of the book's release. And so it's like having a bunch of people show up at your local bookstore at your Barnes and Noble and buy thousands of copies in one day. That pre-order sales, I don't know, that what is that called, the number of sales for all of that moving up counts for all of the sales in that first week, and that first week is a really important release moment. The number of copies that you can sell right away after a book comes out that first week is super important. It's important for if you're trying for any sort of bestseller list, but it also helps the booksellers and book buyers see a little bit of momentum, and they start seeing that up on their suggested reading lists, and you get a little bit of a buzz that way. So paying attention to that, as you said, 120 days beforehand is a great idea because it helps give voice to the book. It's a pretty crowded market. Just have a lot of books that come out
And
all the
people are
time.
interested in knowing the new thing that's out.
Exactly.
And so your new book on the other side of the release is an old book. It's old
Right.
news,
Right.
which isn't a bad thing. It's just that it finds its spot in old news and it might have a long tail on it. There might be people that are still interested in it, but know that the lead up and the algorithms that Amazon
Right.
uses to have the book on hand, so it doesn't say that this is out of stock and it'll be delivered in 2 weeks, because then nobody, including me, will
We
order your
won't
book. I'm not going
remember.
to wait
Right.
2 weeks. So if you waited till the book release and made a big deal a day or two before, then Amazon would get flooded if we were
Right.
successful with all these orders that they couldn't fulfill the next day. And so they put up the banner to say, hey, we're out of stock. And that's kind of death to a new release.
Right.
And so another thought I have is we have just a wonderful publisher and they're doing a terrific job. But we have a desire to like control what happens and when it happens, and working cooperatively with this
Mm-hmm.
fantastic team. But to be very definitive about what we're doing and why we're doing it and where we're doing it.
Mm-hmm.
So podcasts, for instance, you'll get many requests to get on a podcast. And as much fun as that is to do, I just don't have as much time as I wish I had
Mm-hmm.
to do that. So being on their podcast might be a benefit to them and their podcast. You want to make sure that, is this an asset for your book? Is it
Right.
going to get out to more and
Mm-hmm.
different? And if it's not going to get out to a bunch more and a bunch of different people, then I would say let's prioritize to get to the ones that'll make the greatest difference
Mm-hmm.
for you.
Yeah.
And speaking of podcasts, why don't we, if you're an aspiring author and you're working on it a year out, why don't you start the podcast? 'Cause I think we're coming up on 10 million downloads. People listen to podcasts. So why don't you just, if you've got a laptop and zoom.com, you're in business. It won't be as good as microphones and all that, but it'll be 91% is good. I said 91 because 90 sounds like I was just pulling that out of my ear.
91
But
sounded very
91.7,
data driven.
it sounds like just that very Barna group of me. So what I'd like to do is to be that intentional. So
Mm-hmm.
on one side of your brain, I don't know which side that is, but you're writing the book. The
Mm-hmm.
other side of the brain is the business of books. I'd like you to be thinking about the launch. We're going to fuel the rocket 120 days out. And then let's talk about the launch a little bit closer. You'll have a launch team.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just another way of saying you can include a broader range of people talking to their folks more and different. So explain that.
Totally. In fact, I'd love to kind of piggyback on the podcast idea. That's connected to the launch team for sure. I had a book come out not too long ago, and having a podcast, having a space where I was talking with a lot of people, the podcast is just to feed my own curiosity. But a lovely byproduct was that when it was time to release a book, the folks who were listening, as you said, there was no coercion. It was a very organic ask to say, hey, we've been hanging out here. I have a new book. I'd love for you to check it out. That feels so much more like a friendship and a relationship than let me blitz your social media feed with a picture of my book and my face. So the podcast is a great idea to help kind of develop your tribe and talk to the people who are interested in what's interesting to you. The launch team can come straight out of that same crew. I had a fantastic experience with my last launch team.
Yeah.
I think in part because I already felt like we'd been talking for months. So those are the people who are interested in maybe getting an early copy of the book, taking a look, giving their feedback, and then sharing that with their people, sharing that with the people who are already listening to them. This is not like find 100 of your most famous friends. This is find 100 friends, people who are interested in, what you're writing about, interested in the book. We still, even with all our bells and whistles in 2024, most of us buy books upon recommendation. So ads are only a little bit effective. I think you have to have 7 to 10 impressions from just a general everybody ad. But if your friend says to you, you would love this book, you are very, very likely to pick one up for yourself. So a launch team is that. It's that conversation over and over of people saying, oh my gosh, Bob's new book, Catching Whimsy, have you read it? I think you'd really like it. It just helps you spread that ripple to people who really would enjoy and benefit from what you're writing.
Yeah. And you can be kind to the folks on the launch team, create some content, send it just for them. Some videos. Stephanie helps us prepare like videos to send out to people. Just say thanks because they're just a worldwide family of friends.
Yeah, totally.
And then you'll have your opportunity to do something really nice for them when they're launching it, because it's just like we're this group of people within a group of people. And this group of people happens to be ones that write a lot of words.
Right.
And since we are, let's do that together. The book will then launch, and then staying with our analogy, the rocket ship needs to detach from the gantry. Like, I don't know, maybe
that word.
Starlink takes the whole thing, because now they catch the rockets when they're descending, evidently. So
you weren't there,
need to,
so you don't know.
I wasn't there. It's just all guesswork for
that.
me. There's some like 4-star general that's like, so sorry. So when the rocket ship takes off, the thing that's next to it, holding it upright, stays put.
Okay.
You don't take it with you. So the whole idea of when it launches, get your head into the next book.
Mm.
Don't be wringing your hands about the one that you already launched. Let's get your creative head. Let's move from the business of books back into the joy of writing
That's
books.
good.
And that's a great way to kind of guard your heart,
Right.
so that you aren't living and dying by each comment that's made. And you've moved on. You're a year down the road. So write about the stuff that inspires you. At the end of the day, my bias is towards leaving my phone number so people can call up if they wanted to talk about the book, or people have a way to track one another down. Like you have a website with the info. What's your email address if somebody wants to reach you?
Kim at KimberlyStewart.com.
Yeah, there you go.
Easy.
So people will.
I'm not giving you my cell phone.
Yeah,
though.
yeah.
That's where we're different.
That'll come in the show notes. So leave a way for people to get a hold of you. And I would say be courteous. If somebody took the time to write you a note about your book, then write back to them to say, thank you so much for doing that.
Sure.
I just, you'll get quite a few people that will reach out with a call or a thing. Just take the calls, write the thank you notes. They're being super, they're saying, I'd like to have another touch point. And that's just a sign of friendship, like in community. And so honor that by doing it. As I'm not admonishing people, I just say it'd be a really cool thing because people will remember that you took the time to write a word or two back to them.
Definitely.
And don't just say thanks. Like just have an opportunity. Demonstrate that you're an author.
Yes.
You don't need to write
Use all
a
those
paragraph.
words.
Use all the words. Once the book is launched, then you'll have some ongoing things. If you've traditional publishing is one version and self-publishing is other. So what if you describe how do we do that post-launch?
Well, I'm kind of in that now, so I'd love to hear from you about that. I feel like I run really fast and really hard for a long time for a book launch. And then after it's out, there is a little bit of a hitch in my breathing, a little bit of a hitch in the giddy up, because I've been really focused on trying to help those words find the people that would benefit from them. So actually, before turning to self and traditional, I really appreciate what you're saying about having some self-awareness and guarding the more tender parts of your heart in that process, because it's normal. Those of you who are listening and getting ready to launch something that's important to you, or if you have done that, you are absolutely a normal person that costs you. It is pretty vulnerable to be putting the words that are so important to you out in someone's living room. And so I appreciate that you said that, Bob, that there is a little bit of a, it's okay for you to know who gets to speak into that. I'm a total weirdo. I don't read my Amazon reviews because I figure there's not a whole lot I can do about it. It's in print. And I just know for myself that becomes a little bit of a soundtrack.
Yeah.
Most people are super kind on Amazon, and some of them have eaten a bad burrito and they used that time to review your book. We'll never think of that review again, and it stays there for you. So I would say to our listeners, you get to decide how you interact with those kind of more public things. But if somebody emails you, somebody direct messages you, someone comes up to you at a speaking engagement and says, I just want to talk to you about what this book meant to me, pause everything every time, because they have spent probably 8 to 10 hours with you and that book. That is a gift that they're saying to you, this made a difference. You can steep your toes in that and maybe not some of the extra stuff.
Yeah. And there's no cool kids table. Like you just that's the thing we get to do. We get to just not have people that write a country western lyric and then they have managers and they're not available, or
gross.
They get a bit part in a movie and they're not available, or they pastor a big church and they're not available. It's not taking a shot at a pastor. Just like, if you don't like people, I would say, well, first of all, you're going to hate heaven. Everybody, always. And then also to just make some time to be around these people, because it's a really big deal, as you said, to take that time. Yeah. So what we want to do is find another way post-launch to get the word out about your book and others. And you can release, if faith guides your steps, you could release a Bible study about your book. So there would be a release of Love Does, and then about 6 or 8 months later, a Bible study of Love Does. The idea is there have been enough people that have read the book then there would be enough energy spinning that flywheel to make people say, oh, we ought to do this for
Right.
all this. We want to think for those releasing books, cases, not copies.
Mm-hmm.
So if you were to release a study or even a book study, if it isn't a Bible type book, but that there's a further thing, it's another way to re-release the book
Right.
at a time that the book's already had some traction. The book launch team isn't just to talk about, hey, the book's coming up, but also to post reviews.
Mm-hmm.
And so people will read the reviews. Do you do that on
Totally.
Amazon?
Yes.
Yeah, I just say, is it 5 stars? Is it 1 star? Is it,
Right.
and how many? Because if there's only 3 reviews, that will strike me as different than if there's 30,000.
Right.
So tell me the role of the launch team with reviews.
Super, super important. I'm a total hypocrite because I do use reviews. I just don't read my own. But when you have a book coming out, we all know this, right? That when you see, oh, lots of people are talking about this, it helps the book get wings. So the launch team is super important for that. That's part of agreeing to be on a launch team typically, is that you say, I'd love to spend time with the book, and then I'll share my honest thoughts. You're definitely wanting to people to be, clear and not coerced at all in that process. But typically the people who are in that room are rooting for you. And so for them to take that extra step, it can be 10 words. It does not have to be, in fact, probably better if it's not a doctoral thesis. It helps other readers, prospective readers, say, oh, okay, this person thought that was a good way to go. So those are super important. And again, you mentioned the algorithm that kind of bumps that up. We all know when we're shopping on Amazon, at the bottom, it will say, if you like that, you might like this. That starts to be a suggested purchase,
Yes.
So that's super, super powerful. It's letting people's opinion really guide and put some wind in that sail.
Yeah. And so then as you see, this is really helpful for the release of somebody's book. Go do that for their book.
Definitely. That's
Pre-order the book because it's just a good thing, nice thing to do because it helps them in not just the sale of a book and the nickel
Sure.
that they get. It's it starts spinning it up. Amazon, get more of these books.
Right.
Be ready.
Yeah.
And then post something.
Mm-hmm.
You can ask people to post something, but most people are self-aware enough to know that if you're cool and you know somebody has a book coming out, just post something, put it on an Insta story, tell them way to go. It's just being courteous.
That's
and
right.
So in the same way, you don't need to give instructions to people with your book to say, hey, will you please post something and say this or this or this?
Right.
Just send them the book and then they'll know what to do. It's
Right.
like if you call somebody and you miss them and you get the recording and then the recording tells you how to leave a message, I'd be like, dude, I got this.
Heard that one before.
Yeah. So I think that idea, but being strategic enough that at each point of the way, this 120-day arc, we're going to get on podcasts. We're going to create our podcast a year before. So it starts getting that flywheel spinning. Mm-hmm. We're going to do, they call them influencer copies, your ARC, advanced readers copy, to people that you think will post something about it. You don't send it to people you're trying to impress. Send it to people that will say something about the book, but you don't need to tell them. You could just say, here's a book.
I hope you like it.
Yeah, hope you like it. That'll look good. They'll know what to do if they're cool. And if they had to read the instructions, they're not going to post anything anyway.
Totally.
So they're like, how do you turn this computer on? So, and then post-launch, we're going to have a launch team, then post-launch, a second release that comes out. And then talk about putting some content out in social media around your book, both before and after. What's your practice?
Such a great question. That was one of my questions, and I had already passed right on by. Social media is such a big bus, an awesome bus. You can get a lot of people on that bus. And it's very important when we're talking about putting a book out into the world. And so there are lots of ways folks approach social media. For me, I vet all posts in social media through the lens of, will this help infuse courage in someone, make them laugh, make them think? Those are my rubrics, that if it feels like I'm promoting myself or trying to make myself look any certain way, that goes on the cutting room floor. It's just not very engaging. And also that means I better spend some time on my own with Jesus. So if there's something that you have on your heart and your brain that can help both speak into what the book is about and help people where they are, then it gets a green light. I think that's a green light. Again, that 120 days beforehand, that's when you really start doing with more frequency, talking about what's in the book, maybe what it was like to write the book, but again, always the question is who's holding this in their hand? Who is the reader? Who is the prospective listener reader? If that's your question, then all the other stuff is speed bumps. So for you, writing a book about Whimsy, a 365-day gift to families and to individuals who can go through this, you are thinking, okay, well, and actually that's what you're doing for this book is very timely at the end of the year, beginning of a new year. You're picturing your reader, even in a social media post, you're picturing your reader thinking, gosh, I'd like to try something new.
Next year.
Next year. Exactly. So if they're already on that train, you're looking to speak into their pre-existing need or want and just meet them there, even on social media.
Yeah. And on social media, just pinning a post. Hey, I've got a new book coming out.
Right.
This is the name. And this when it comes out. Hope you enjoy it. And then just pin that on social media.
Right.
Then any other
Evergreen.
infrequent references you make. And that would be stylistic for each person. But just put it as an Insta story.
Right.
You don't need to crowd all the Hollywood squares
Right.
with
15
infomercials
Yeah, right.
about
Totally.
that. Now, everybody's different.
Mhm.
And some people find that I've experienced some people I like a lot that do that every day. They'll say, here's something. And then, but what you could do, which is kind of a medium place, just repost. If somebody
Mhm.
says something nice about the book or they got it, then you can repost that
Yeah.
on an Insta story. So it'll go away because you're going to continue to move on. You're going to get your head in the next book and continue to produce. So I hope this has been helpful for people as you're thinking about the different phases. We broke this down into 3 parts of the last 3 podcasts. What kind of admonitions would you give people, Kim, as we launch them into the writing of their books? Because you're just such a great motivator of people, and you've coached, tens and tens of people about like each year and like getting books done. So I'm giving you the last word.
Thank you. That's kind of you, Bob. I think the best way to approach this is with a team. So if that's a person in your home or a friend, if you have a friend like Bob who is willing to just absolutely put oxygen on the fire, it's a marathon. Writing a book is not typically done in an afternoon. That would be a brochure. So if you have this desire and this dream to do this through all stages, call on the people who love you and who will say to you over and over, you can do this. You're not done. You can do this. Check in with me next week. And that's from when you are writing the book, when you're in the developmental or editorial stage, when you are launching the book, all along the way, the people who love you will be good to remind you what you're made of. And you do that for them too. So just like anything else that matters, stick to it. Keep your feet very grounded in who you are, and write it. Get that thing out there because the world needs it.
Yeah. The world really needs and wants your words. And even if the world didn't, we would.
Yeah.
So start
really
with
would.
one word, the. Don't make your second word end. But just start say, here's a word today. And then maybe tomorrow you'll have 2 words or 3 words. But the important part is start. Well, you guys, thanks a million for joining in. We will see you next week. Write your words.